What is going on, Sabres fans, and welcome to another episode of the Sabres Spotlight podcast where we shine a light on all things Sabres hockey. Tonight, I'm coming at you with a solo episode. It's been a little while since we have been on the mic here over at Sabres Spotlight. We've just been a little bit busy, but this streak has been something to talk about. So we're going to get into it tonight. And a big reason why we were kind of on break for a little bit there was because we had some things going on, and then the streak was going. So we along with everybody else did not want to jinx it. So we decided we're going to put off a recording, sacrificing as much as we wanted to talk about things, and get back on the mic here to connect with the Sabrehood here during this incredible run the Sabres have been on. We did not want to jinx anything. So now we're back, and we've been getting some messages from people. When are we coming back? When are we getting another show going? So it's just me here tonight, so I'm going to try and keep things kind of short and concise here, but there has been a lot to talk about, definitely a lot to talk about. So I'm going to start by getting into the streak. We'll kind of recap that, go through some statistics, kind of overall thoughts about the streak, kind of reflect on the lines that they had during that 10-game winning streak, and then I have some talking points that I want to get into to kind of close out the show, and we'll, of course, look ahead into the next coming weeks. We are closing in on the Olympic break, so the Sabres have a bunch of games. I think they have like 14 games over the next few weeks before the Olympics come at the beginning of February. They're currently sitting in a wild card one spot, which is exciting, being that it's January 10th, and they really dug themselves out of a hole here. But we are certainly going to learn a lot more about this team over the next few weeks, as they have a lot of games coming up, like I said, that are going to feel like playoff games every single night. But first, Sabres fans, let's get into this 10-game winning streak. First of all, it comes after they win three. Well, they lose three to start the 6-game road trip. This is, way back when. And there's some turmoil amongst the fans and some angst about Kevin Adams. And the big, I think, nail in the coffin was when, at least for Kevin Adams, was sending Noah Ostlund down. And he had kind of a little rift with Lindy there. He gave some comments after the one post-game conference about how he wasn't sure why Ostlund went down. It just seems like Adams' time was ending. We all know that. Adams gets the can, and that's after we come back and win 3 games. Before the streak started, the Sabres were sitting at 11, 14, and 4, 26 points, last place in the Atlantic Division. They go out west, and we're thinking just try to survive this 6-game road trip and go 3-3. And they actually do that. But they lose those first 3 games. They win those next 3. They come back home, and you get the news that Kevin Adams is fired, even after they had just won 3 games. And it's just kind of wild. That news kind of came out of nowhere. But again, the writing was on the wall. So then they rip off wins against Philly, Islanders, the Devils, Ottawa, Boston, St. Louis, Dallas. And that Dallas game was really a great game on New Year's Eve. And everyone was kind of like in on the Sabres, national media talking about the streak. Fans are excited New Year's Eve, and that was a big test. And Dallas had been reeling a little bit at that time. I want to say they had lost like 5 in a row, but the Sabres really took it to them, and it was an impressive game because Dallas gets that kind of fluky goal in the first 20 seconds, and that crowd was going crazy on New Year's Eve. And then they shut it down. They don't even let Dallas score another goal, and I felt like they controlled play against a team that really kind of plays a similar style to what the Sabres are playing right now. And so that ends up being the last game of the win streak. The Sabres, of course, then go on to lose to Columbus, but they tie the franchise record for games won. It would have been so nice to break it. But this Sabres team has really passed a lot of tests along the way, and so I'm going to get into some stats of the streak here. So as I mentioned, they started this streak 11, 14, and 4 with 26 points, and they end the streak 21-14 of 4, 46 points in a wild card 2 spot. Along the streak, they have 7 road wins and 3 home wins, which in itself is kind of impressive given that it seemed like it took the Sabres forever to even get a regulation road win throughout as the season began. It was like a month into the season, and we're all still waiting for that regulation road win. Outscored opponents 36-18, so that'll get it done. 3.6 goals for per game and 1.8 goals against per game. And when I get into some of the numbers for the goaltending here, you can kind of see why that 1.8 goals against is just really, really impressive. They were getting some really solid net minding along the way here. The power play didn't have much of a factor into the streak. Power play goes 5 for 28, 17.8%, just to give the listeners, the league average right now is about 20.5%. So the Sabres power play is still not where it needs to be. Now, Jason Zucker was out for the length of this streak, and we all know how much he means to the power play. And he will elevate that a little bit. He did score a power play goal in his first game that he came back in a couple games ago, and so he will elevate the power play a little bit. But the power play is, leaving something to be desired, and something that still needs to be worked on, and that might not come until the end of the season with coaching changes. If that happens, that's all remaining to be seen with the new regime change. But things are going well for the team overall, so you don't expect any big changes in season right now, nor is that necessarily necessary. But that is something that will get looked at, I'm sure, as and fans will be scrutinizing as the year goes on and at year's end. Penalty kill has been insane, and I believe it's ranked twice or second in the NHL right now, potentially even higher. I don't know if they're at number 1 now, but they go 20 for 24 on this streak, so 83.3%. And the league average right now is 79.5%. So the penalty kill has really been a strength of this team. They're sitting right now at 85.22% on the season. And so the penalty kill is crazy because they have such good presence and they play well off each other with McLeod and Tuck at the top. The guys just know what they're doing, and they're just active sticks, blocking shots. And the penalty kill is really a strength of this team. And you almost feel like when they're out there, you're waiting for like shorthanded chances as well, just to show you how good it has been. And they just actually scored the Sabres shorthanded goals in back-to-back games. And so the penalty kill is something that's really been providing the team a boost on special teams and is definitely way better than last season. So lots of improvement there, aside from the power play, which again goes 5 for 28. Getting to the goaltending, and this of course plays a big factor in the penalty killing. I ran all the numbers through this 10-game streak, and the Sabres come out of the streak with a .933 save percentage. Colton Ellis got a concussion in the first game of the streak versus Edmonton, and he was replaced by Alex Lyon. So there was 7 games started throughout the streak by Alex Lyon, and UPL got 3 of those games, and they were just – those two guys just played so well during the streak. And, of course, Alex Lyon was kind of in the doghouse at the time that the streak had started. So there was, when the Sabres were kind of reeling a little bit there and sitting in last place, it was kind of interesting as far as the goaltending goes, because Lyon started off hot. He was playing really good. He's kind of the only reason the Sabres were kind of somewhat afloat after those first 7-8 games, even though he didn't have a lot of wins, nor did the team. He was still playing really good and giving the team a chance to win every single night. So he starts off hot, but then he has a couple bad games. He gets benched, he gets pulled one game, and then he was kind of in the doghouse for a couple weeks there. He only had like one start over like a 10 or 12-day period. And you have Colton Ellis, who came in and had one nice start, but then looks shaky at times. And UPL, I know Yarmo likes him, but he's been shaky. And so when this streak really started, you weren't really sure where you were going to go with the goaltending, and it ended up being a nice bounce back for Lyon, which I was glad to see. And UPL played great too, and he still is playing great. UPL's had some really strong games, and we'll get into the goaltending a little bit more when we talk about kind of some of my talking points a little bit later in the show here. But the goaltending throughout this streak was just really, really good. Again, a 933 save percentage. That is well above the league average right now. And I'm just double checking that. So league average right now is at 891. So almost 40 percentage points higher on the save percentage. Just to let you know how good these goaltenders were playing for the boys. The lines throughout the streak, the top line, Peyton Krebs. Peyton Krebs on the top line is kind of wild. And no one ever thought that if you tell somebody at the beginning of the season that Peyton Krebs is playing on your top line for 10 games in a row, you'd say that the Sabres probably aren't doing well, or they have injuries, or, are they at the bottom and just kind of seeing what they have and whatnot. But Krebs, Thompson, and Doan, and that line was honestly fine throughout the streak. Benson, McLeod, and Quinn on the third line. And that's kind of been an interesting line. Benson and McLeod, obviously, you know what you're getting out of those guys. Quinn really, really struggled during the streak. Felt like he had moments here and there, but for the most part, felt like Benson and McLeod were kind of carrying that line. And then you got Oslin, Norris, and Tuck, which throughout this 10-game streak, that line was just insane. I think that was by far the best line the Sabres had going throughout this streak, as well as the fourth line, the Greenway Dunn Mallenstein line. It kind of seemed like whenever Lindy needed to get some momentum, or just kind of needed to get some puck possession, get some presence back into the game, maybe get some puck possession in the offensive zone, or just a couple big hits and get a little bit of more momentum kind of leaning in the Sabres' way. That's the line that did it. And Josh Dunn has kind of really impressed me throughout this streak, and the Sabres are going to have some decisions to make on lineups as they start getting some guys healthier. There's been a lot of guys that have been, still kind of on the injured reserve and down right now, so they've been able to get away with, having some of these guys, but they will have some decisions to make on some of these young guys that were playing good, like a Noah Oslin, like a Josh Dunn, like a Tyson Kozak, who was playing really good before they got injured. So there's going to be some interesting things that we'll talk about throughout the coming weeks as things progress, and hopefully the Sabres are still kind of hanging around and in that wildcard spot or even higher. But those were the lines throughout the streak, and you can't blame Lindy for not switching things up, because they were just getting it done. And again, I kind of give the number one line here to the Oslin Norris Tuck line. They seem like they were the most difference makers. But again, Greenway, Dunn, Mallenstein really kind of steadied things. And then Krebs, Thompson, and Doan made their plays when they needed to. Benson, McLeod, Quinn kind of held water. So it was a nice balance throughout this winning streak. And you could kind of see how Lindy was deploying them. And the balance along those lines just really made it fun to watch, because you kind of knew what you were getting and what you were expecting. And that hasn't always been the case for the Sabres over the last 14 years. Really, you have a couple lines, and even the lines that you have had rolling at times throughout this drought, it's not consistent. There's been a lot of turnover and things, and so just kind of really nice to have that consistency throughout this 10 games, and to be honest, these handful of games coming out of the streak. All right, let's get into some of these talking points here now that we kind of summarized the streak there, because I want to start with my thoughts on Peyton Krebs and that top line. If you rewind back to our last couple shows with Ryan and I, we were kind of down on Peyton Krebs, and certainly not foreseeing him as a top line player. And again, I still don't think he's a top line player, but I kind of like what we're getting from him. I don't know if it's, because he's playing with Tage Thompson and Josh Doan, and those games just kind of like synergize well with one another. I kind of get this feeling that Peyton Krebs will be a Yarmo guy for sure because of the effort. So if it's not necessarily sticking on the top line, which I don't think any of us anticipate anyways, I think he might be a guy that is sticking around. The effort is certainly there, and he's not going to be a finisher, but he's been working real hard. He's been winning battles along the boards. He's actually been a little bit better at setting up plays, and there's just a lot of energy there. And I think it works well. I think that kind of player works well with Tage Thompson. We've seen that before when Benson has been on the top line with Tage. It just kind of frees him up a little bit to know that there's somebody on his line that can do some of the dirty work, that can be a little bit more defensively responsible. And Tage has taken some steps in his game there. But at the end of the day, I think we all agree that we want him to be, much more offensive minded anyways. And he plays more freed up when he can think about that a little bit less and just kind of react a little bit more and kind of make plays. You've seen that we haven't really seen a ton of like Tage Thompson like plays and like awesome highlight goals, over the last like year and a half. And that's fine. We don't always need that. He's still getting his and he's still making plays, but he's not being relied on to make those type of outstanding plays. Again, just because the system that the Sabres are playing in, and that they have an identity now in a way that they want to play. And having a guy like Zach Benson or Peyton Krebs on his line makes that a lot easier. And so I've kind of grown on Peyton Krebs a little bit here. Again, I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think he's going to be one of the guys that are moved by Jarmo Kekalainen. And that's something I want to get into too here before we get into some of the other things, is that with this Olympic break coming up, there is a freeze that occurs before the actual trade deadline, because there's no trading that is allowed during the Olympics. And so you kind of have a time period here over the next few weeks where you could see some movement by Jarmo Kekalainen on the Sabres front. And I don't know, who that's going to be. We could kind of speculate on a lot of different players. It's not like really any of these guys are Yarmo guys, as a lot of the current roster has been put together from Kevyn Adams. You can kind of tell who he might gravitate towards, especially with his introductory press conference, how much he talked about compete levels and consistency on the ice, and being accountable to your game and things. Peyton Krebs is a guy that I think that he will like guys like Ryan McLeod, guys like Zach Benson. So you can kind of narrow in on some guys that you think he's going to like and who are going to stay, and then what contracts are maybe tradable. I think the obvious name that everyone's heard now is moving on from like a Jack Quinn. And Jack Quinn had a good game tonight, and his shooting percentage has been low, but he had two nice goals tonight. And so you just don't know. I know Yarmo's talked to all the guys and said, this is kind of your time to show me what you got. But with this mini Olympic, trade deadline coming up, there could be some movement for the Sabres over the next few weeks. And that's good. That's a healthy thing to have. And that's something that the players should expect, because what you didn't get from Kevyn Adams over the last few years was these in-season moves to make the team better and to reward the guys for playing good, or just help them when they're struggling. I mean, just point to the losing streak last season and the infamous "the answers are in the room" speech with the boys, and not doing anything to just help that team out. And that's where I think going back to the streak is where a lot of the national talking heads are saying, oh, we got to give Kevyn Adams his flowers and things. And I don't know. I don't think this streak happens if Kevin Adams is still the one in charge, and that's hard to say again because a lot of the roster is what he built, but you could tell there was angst among the fan base, and that bleeds into the players. And the players were not motivated to play for Kevin Adams. I think a lot of his messaging was dry. A lot of the messaging was stale. There's a lack of belief in again being able to make the team better and not being successful at making the playoffs over the last 4 years. And there's just a lot kind of weighing over this organization. Kevin Adams was just kind of this black cloud that needed to be lifted. And then you come out of that West Coast trip 3-3, and then you get this little extra boost from Kevin Adams not being in charge anymore and Yarmo being the guy, and you just feel like you're working for the guy now. And I think that's one of the other reasons that the Sabres have really went on this little run and are playing with such passion because essentially they're playing for their jobs, right? This is an audition for Yarmo and who's going to stay here. And like we just talked about, there's certain guys that I think Yarmo will like, but we really don't know what's going to happen. And it'll be interesting to see what happens over these next few weeks as we approach this little mini deadline. And I hope something happens. And for the first time in a long time, you feel like something actually could. And so, if anything does, we'll be talking about it here. But lots of interesting things coming up over these next few weeks between the amount of games the Sabres have and any movement that could possibly happen. I want to get into Mattias Samuelsson a little bit more. 7 goals and 15 assists this season. I mean, this is just crazy. He started off the season playing good hockey. There's really never been like a stretch of games where I feel like he's been bad. And it's just so bizarre given that Ryan and me and a lot of other people included wanted him to be bought out last year. And there was all that talk. It's just kind of incredible the turnaround that we've seen. And, I think there's lessons to be had here just about these players and when they're that young and how much we're expecting these guys to do and just the environment that was Kevin Adams and this team with a clear lack of leadership from previous captaincies and just the team overall. And you kind of see it with a guy like Mattias Samuelsson where, he's still a young guy. I want to say he's like 25 and he's kind of breaking out this year, and you can see it. He's just playing more like a man, being more physical in front of the net, winning more of those puck battles along the boards, making smart, calm decisions in his own defensive zone, choosing to either just clear the puck or kind of move it up, with some of his teammates. And the offense that he's looking to generate and create is just kind of a breath of fresh air. And it's been especially necessary because Dahlin's been off to somewhat of a slow start, which is crazy because I think he's still like top 10 among the NHL defensemen in points for. It just kind of shows you how awesome Rasmus Dahlin is, even when he's, struggling in all of our eyes, that he's just so good. But Samuelsson has really kind of, got his glow up this year, and the 7 goals, an interesting little tidbit here, that matches his career goals to date. 212 games of prior NHL experience to get to 7 goals, and he's got 7 goals this season. And that goal that he scored a couple games ago, I'm blanking on who it was against now because we beat Vancouver. It wasn't against Vancouver, so it was whoever we played after that, and he just comes down and just roofs it on like right on the goal line, and just like an insane play, and the bench went absolutely nuts. And there's enough of a sample here where you're confident that this is going to keep going. And the contract didn't look good at the time, but now it's looking like a fine deal for Mattias Samuelsson. And of course, you get the benefit of playing playing with Rasmus Dahlin. But let's be honest, and he's kind of been the one that's carrying that pair anyway. So I want to just kind of make sure we give him his due. And let's move into the goaltending, because this is an interesting conversation now with Alex Lyon hurt, a lower body injury, and we don't really know the extent of it. But goalies are interesting, and it's hard to say how long he's going to be out for. So you have this combination of UPL and Ellis that are seemingly having to, take over from here on out. And there's a little bit of hesitancy there because UPL, again, he's been good, but Ellis has been kind of up and down. So I don't really know what you're going to get there. I'm just kind of hoping that we can kind of ride a hot UPL until Lion is back and then kind of go back to kind of Lion and UPL. But they're going to go with who's ever playing hot at the moment. I think either way, Ellis is right now the odd man out. And if he's going to have a couple starts, you're probably not going to be able to sneak him through waivers. The time to do that was probably about a week ago, when he was coming off of the injury, and maybe St. Louis scoops him up, but nobody else probably would have. So I think now, though, with him getting a start and looking halfway decent, and if he happens to get another one before Lyon comes back and they make a move and he plays good, you're probably not sneaking him through on waivers. So that's going to be the decision that the Sabres have to kind of make as they go forward. So they're probably not going to want to stick with 3 goalies as some of these guys come back. And they don't want to risk losing any position players because you're going to need depth there as the season marches on and you're in the playoff race. So again, hopefully we can kind of get Lyon back here soon and have that kind of regular tandem of Lyon and UPL. Speaking of the injuries here, the Sabres are pretty healthy now, but they still have some noticeable injuries here. So Tyson Kozak's out still, and don't forget how good he was playing before he got injured. So that's a guy that can come back and be on a fourth line. I mean, he is a guy who can kind of interchange anywhere in the lineup, which is why I like him because of his versatility. He's another water bug, kind of like a Peyton Krebs, kind of like a Zach Benson. Maybe not as high of a ceiling as like a Zach Benson, but I think he's kind of on par with like what a Payne Krebs gives you, and again was kind of chipping in offensively before he got injured as well. That injury was really unfortunate for him because he was playing some good hockey. One of the few guys who was really playing good during that stretch at the beginning of the year when they were struggling a little bit, and so I'm interested to see what he can be when he comes back and where he might fit. Justin Danforth. Again, another kind of, third, fourth line guy, someone I'm not all too familiar with. And we got really limited looks of him as a Sabre. So who knows what's going to happen there, but definitely a guy who's been in the league and can provide you some depth if he comes back. Yuri Kulik, don't know what's going to happen there. He's got the blood clotting thing that he's kind of working through. When that news came across, I was kind of under the assumption that it was going to be kind of a year-long thing, and we haven't really gotten many updates on that front, but he is someone that's still kind of waiting in the wings, and hopefully we get some more insights kind of on him soon, if he's going to be coming back this year or not. And then you got a couple defensemen still out, Connor Timmins and Michael Kesselring. Bryson and Metza have been doing fine. The word I have there is that you're not really trusting Bryson and Metza, of course, to play big minutes. Right now, they're each playing about like 10 minutes a night right now. And so you have your other guys playing big minutes and you're getting good contributions from them. But how long is that going to hold up? And you just don't want to risk an injury by having to play these guys more than you have to. So if you can get a Timmins back, if you can get a Kesselring back and just kind of even out some of that playing time a little bit, then you decrease chances of things going awry. I think Timmins and Kesselring, when they're back, will slot right back into the lineup there. Although Bryson and Admery are kind of, or Bryson and Metza are kind of filling in, admirably right now. And congrats to Metza on his scoring his first NHL goal versus Vancouver. I was at that game, and the team was pretty hyped for him, and the building got pretty loud for him. So congratulations to him. And yeah, he's come up and he's been pretty responsible, responsibly defensive, and he's at a minimum. If he goes down, he's a guy that you can kind of count on for some minutes later on in the year after having a taste. But we'll have to just kind of see what happens with Timmins and Kesselring as we go. Before we finish up here, last bit of Sabres news that I want to get to, just big congrats to Tage, UPL, and Darlene for making the Olympic team, so that we'll be able to watch them in a few weeks as the Olympics get underway. But let's look ahead on the schedule here. So the Sabres have 5 home games in a row. They finished up with a win tonight, 5-3 win over Anaheim, and to improve to 25, 15, and 4. So they have 52 points, and they currently hold the wild card 1 spot. So the Sabres are at like a 609 point percentage right now, and they're on pace for about 100 points this season. That will definitely get it done. And so we'll see, what happens here, but it looks like it's some sustainable hockey. But the next few weeks will really be telling. They got 3 games against Montreal, and this upcoming week they have 1 game against Montreal. They got a Philly game in there, a Florida game, and a Minnesota game. So some good competition, coming to Key Bank. The positive there is that the Sabres have been locking things down at Key Bank and really, really playing some good hockey there for all of last year. The end of last season, the second half of last season, and the first half of this season have been very kind to Buffalo fans in Key Bank. The Sabres have really kind of made it a fortress, and that's something that Lindy and the guys have harped on, I know, about making it tough to play at home and making sure teams know that when they come to Key Bank, they're going to get a battle. And they've been one of the winningest teams at home throughout 2025, and they're off to a good start this year. So we'll see what happens with this big week coming up here. But the Sabres are doing what they need to do right now and just banking a ton of points, and they find themselves in a wild card spot right now. And with a big week this week, they can get themselves even further. They're only at this point in time 5 points out of first place in the division. That's how tight things are right now. But again, you're only a handful of points out of dropping down a few notches as well. The Atlantic division and the whole Eastern Conference really is just kind of deadlocked in the middle there, as no one from the West can seemingly take any points away from these guys. But I think that's going to do it for today. This was nice to just kind of get back on and hopefully get back on here next week after a few wins from with Florida and Philly and Montreal. But the Sabres have been really, really exciting. So just a quick little show here tonight to kind of get things rolling again here on Sabres Spotlight. And as always, follow the show on Twitter at Sabres Spotlight. That's where we're tweeting during the show and looking to interact with fans over there. And then if you have any emails or any questions or thoughts for the show, now's the time to ask. This is going to be a fun run here, hopefully, to end the season. And as we're trucking through on the show here week by week, hopefully we can get some more questions from listeners of the show or thoughts, things you want us to talk about as we go. It's going to be hopefully a fun ride to end the season here, and it would be it'd be cool to get some fans and some listeners of the show to send us some insights. But that's going to be to the Sabres Spotlight email address, sabresspotlight@gmail.com, and that's all included in the show notes below. As always, stay safe in the Sabrehood, and we will see everybody in the next episode. Later.